You keep telling yourself that tomorrow will be different, that tomorrow you'll start earlier, stay focused, and finally finish what you've been delaying. But tomorrow comes, and the same excuses rise again. This cycle of procrastination eats away not only at your time, but at your confidence. Each unfinished task whispers the same lie, that you're not ready yet. Musashi would have called this the disease of hesitation. He believed that hesitation kills more warriors than the sword. In his writings, he left a simple rule that cuts through this weakness. Act without delay. Not tomorrow, not later, not when you feel prepared. Act now. This rule is not about speed. It's about courage. Courage to strike when your mind wants to wait. Courage to step forward when fear suggests retreat. Musashi lived by this principle in every duel, in every choice, and it was the reason he never lost. In this journey, you'll discover how to recognize hesitation for what it truly is, how to break procrastination before it traps you, and how to train your mind to act with clarity and force. By the end, you won't just understand the samurai rule against procrastination. You'll know how to live it. Musashi taught that the deadliest enemy is not always in front of you. It often hides inside your own mind, disguised as hesitation. In battle, even the slightest pause can mean death. Outside of battle, hesitation slowly drains your strength until your dreams die quietly, without you even noticing. That is why he treated hesitation as a disease, one that needed to be cut out completely. Hesitation feeds on illusions. It tells you that waiting will make you stronger, that thinking longer will make the decision clearer, that tomorrow will be the right day to act. But in Musashi's way, tomorrow does not exist. The only strike that matters is the one delivered in the present. To wait is to surrender your power to circumstances you cannot control. Look closely at your own life. How many opportunities have slipped away because you told yourself you weren't ready? How many projects have you buried under the excuse of someday? Hesitation always speaks the same language, later. But later never arrives. Musashi's life was proof. He fought duels as a teenager, not because he was perfectly prepared, but because he refused to wait. The tragedy of hesitation is not only lost time, but the erosion of self-trust. Every time you delay, you silently teach yourself that you cannot be relied upon. Your word to yourself loses weight. Discipline collapses not in one dramatic failure, but in countless small delays that train your mind to disobey its own commands. Musashi understood this deeply. That is why he insisted, once you decide, act immediately, not recklessly, but decisively. Hesitation wastes energy, divides the mind, and weakens the spirit. Action unifies everything. It channels thought, body, and will end to a single force that cannot be stopped. To defeat procrastination, you must first recognize hesitation as your real opponent. Not lack of time, not lack of resources, not even fear itself, but the pause you allow between decision and action. Cut that pause, and you cut procrastination at its root. In his writings, Musashi repeated a principle so simple that most overlook its power. Act without delay. He did not mean reckless rushing. He meant cutting the gap between intention and execution. That space, those seconds of hesitation, is where fear grows, where excuses multiply, and where procrastination finds its home. By eliminating the gap, you eliminate its power. Think of how you face tasks today. You decide you need to exercise, but you wait. You know you should write, but you prepare endlessly. You promise yourself you'll start, but you scroll instead. Every second you delay, the mind builds resistance. Musashi's rule is brutally direct. The moment you decide, move. Even a small step, even imperfect, but move. The power of immediate action is not in the action itself, but in the momentum it creates. A single swing of the sword is not victory, but it commits you to battle. Likewise, taking the first step in a task commits you to the path. Once you are moving, the weight of resistance collapses. Waiting only makes the burden heavier. Musashi practiced this in every duel. He never froze, never lingered. The instant an opening appeared, he struck. His opponents often hesitated, calculating, second-guessing. That hesitation was their death. The same is true in life. The one who hesitates loses. not because the world is cruel, but because the moment passes while they stand still. The beauty of this rule is its simplicity. You don't need motivation, inspiration, or perfect conditions. You need only to shorten the space between thought and action until they become inseparable. Decide and do. That is Musashi's way. If you live by this, procrastination dissolves. Not because tasks become easier, but because you stop giving them time to grow into monsters in your mind. Action kills hesitation. And when hesitation dies, discipline lives. Most people believe procrastination can be defeated with more motivation. They wait for the perfect song, the perfect speech, the perfect surge of energy to finally begin. But Musashi would laugh at this illusion. He knew that those who depend on motivation are already weak, because motivation rises and falls like the wind. You cannot build a fortress on something that changes every hour. Motivation fails because it is emotional. It depends on how you feel, and feelings are unpredictable. One day you feel unstoppable, the next you cannot rise from bed. If your discipline is chained to feelings, then your life will always swing wildly with them. Musashi's teaching was the opposite. Act regardless of feeling. Action creates strength. Feelings follow later. This is why so many start with fire but quickly fade. They mistake the spark of motivation for lasting discipline. But a spark without fuel dies in seconds. Musashi fueled his life not with bursts of emotion, but with unshakable practice. He cut thousands of strokes daily, not because he felt inspired, but because that was the way. If you rely on motivation, procrastination wins by default, because procrastination always waits for the moment when your motivation dips, and it always will. The cycle is predictable. Energy rises, you start. Energy falls, you stop. Weeks later, you wonder why nothing changed. Musashi broke this cycle by making action a master, not emotion. The paradox is that once you stop depending on motivation and start acting regardless, motivation actually appears more often. Energy follows action, not the other way around. You do not wait to feel ready. You act, and readiness grows inside you as a result. This is the hidden wisdom Musashi lived. So when you hear the voice that says, "I don't feel like it," recognize it as the trap it is. That voice is procrastination's disguise. Act anyway, because in Musashi's way, the one who acts without need for motivation is the one who cannot be stopped. Musashi believed that decision-making itself was a form of training. Every choice was a cut of the sword, sharpening either strength or weakness. The longer you hesitate, the duller your blade becomes. But each decisive act, no matter how small, strengthens the muscle of decision until action becomes instinct. Discipline is nothing more than the art of choosing quickly and committing fully. Most people procrastinate not because the task is impossible, but because they delay the decision. They linger between options, analyzing endlessly, waiting for certainty. Musashi saw this hesitation as death. In battle, waiting too long meant the opponent's sword was already in motion. In life, waiting too long means opportunities are already gone. To train the muscle of decision, you must practice cutting faster. Begin with small things. What time you'll rise, what food you'll eat, which task you'll start. Decide and then act immediately. Each time you reduce the gap between decision and action, you build strength. Each delay, however, weakens the link until you can no longer trust yourself. Musashi himself never allowed the luxury of endless debate. He faced his duels, his travels, and his training with the same principle. Once the path is clear, do not hesitate. His victories were not only the result of skill, but of decision. He moved when others paused, and that was enough to shift the outcome. In your own life, indecision is the soil where procrastination grows. To kill procrastination, you must starve indecision. Make decisions quickly, act immediately, and trust that strength will come after movement. The more you repeat this process, the more natural it becomes, until hesitation disappears altogether. A strong decision made today is worth more than a perfect decision made tomorrow, because tomorrow may never arrive. Musashi understood this, and that is why his way remains timeless. The warrior wins because he decides when others delay. Procrastination rarely begins with a dramatic choice. It starts in the smallest delays. the ones that seem harmless. I'll do it in 5 minutes. I'll start after lunch. I'll finish tomorrow. Each small delay feels light, almost invisible. But Musashi taught that every pause carries weight, and when repeated, those weights pile up until they crush the spirit. The danger of small delays is that they train the mind to accept weakness. Each time you postpone, you are rehearsing failure. You may think you are saving energy, but you are actually feeding a pattern of avoidance. Over time, this pattern becomes who you are. Discipline erodes not through great defeats, but through countless small surrenders. Musashi understood that strength is measured in the details. He practiced not only in battles, but in how he walked, how he held his brush, how he sharpened his sword. To him, there was no small act. Every action revealed either strength or weakness. By treating every choice as part of the way, he built discipline that could not be shaken. Think of your own life. How many goals have you lost not because of one catastrophic failure, but because of 1,000 tiny delays? The workout you skipped, the page you didn't write, the call you postponed. Each delay whispered the same message. Later, but later quietly became never. To defeat procrastination, you must treat small delays as enemies, not as harmless excuses. You must act with urgency even in the smallest matters, because the way you treat the small is the way you will face the great. Musashi lived by this truth, and it is why his discipline lasted a lifetime. The weight of small delays may feel light in the moment, but when they accumulate, they can bury your future. To cut procrastination, you must cut the smallest excuses first. One act of discipline today is heavier than 1,000 promises of tomorrow. Musashi's life proved a timeless truth. Greatness is not built in sudden bursts of effort, but in steady, unbroken consistency. Most people procrastinate because they believe they must wait for the perfect moment to give maximum intensity. They plan great leaps, but neglect daily steps. Musashi knew that intensity without consistency fades quickly, while consistency, even in small doses, builds strength that lasts a lifetime. In his training, he did not perform dramatic feats once in a while. He repeated the same cut thousands of times, every day for years. His discipline was not forged in occasional explosions of energy, but in quiet, relentless repetition. That is why his skill became instinct, not because of talent, but because his consistency made weakness impossible. Procrastination thrives on a fantasy of intensity. It whispers, "Tomorrow I'll do double. Next week, I'll start strong." But that promise never arrives. Intensity delays action. Consistency demands it. Musashi understood that one honest stroke today was worth more than 1,000 promised tomorrow. To follow this principle, shift your focus from dramatic beginnings to steady continuations. Don't ask, "How much can I do today?" Ask instead, "What can I do every day without fail?" This is how habits are formed, how procrastination is defeated, and how identity is reshaped. The truth is that consistency is boring, and that is why most avoid it. They crave excitement, novelty, inspiration. But Musashi chose the boring path of endless repetition because he knew that boredom is the crucible of mastery. If you can endure it, you can endure anything. Procrastination dies when consistency is born, because then there is no decision to make, no delay to consider. You act not because you feel inspired, but because it is who you are. And once action becomes identity, hesitation no longer exists. Musashi understood that discipline is fragile if it remains only an action. Actions can be delayed, avoided, or abandoned. But when discipline becomes identity, it cannot be taken from you. You no longer act disciplined because you should. You act disciplined because it is who you are. There is no separation between the person and the practice. Most people procrastinate because they see discipline as something external, a tool they use when convenient. They think of it as a routine, a checklist, a temporary effort. But identity is deeper. When you truly believe, "I am someone who acts immediately," hesitation dissolves. Your self-image carries you through moments when willpower is absent. Musashi did not train daily because he felt like it. He trained daily because he was training itself. His actions were not a performance. They were an expression of his nature. That is why he could endure solitude, discomfort, and endless repetition without losing strength. Discipline was no longer a task. It was his reflection in the mirror. This is where most fail. They try to build discipline without changing identity. They rely on sheer effort, hoping motivation will last forever. But unless you see yourself as the kind of person who acts decisively, you will always return to hesitation. Identity determines action, and action reinforces identity in a cycle that can either trap you or free you. The path, then, is to begin shaping your identity with small but unbroken acts. Each time you act without delay, you are not just completing a task. You are proving to yourself who you are. Over time, these proofs accumulate until they reshape your entire self-image. You stop trying to be disciplined and start being discipline itself. When procrastination no longer fits who you are, it disappears naturally. You don't have to fight it anymore. You have simply outgrown it, because your identity no longer allows it. That was Musashi's secret. He didn't force discipline. He embodied it. Musashi lived by a principle that shattered procrastination at its root: absolute presence. He believed that the only moment with power is the one you hold now. The future is uncertain. The past is untouchable, and hesitation lives only in the space between them. By focusing completely on the present, he stripped procrastination of its breeding ground. Most procrastination happens because the mind escapes the present. You think about how long the task will take, how difficult it might be, how you might fail tomorrow. These thoughts create weight, and that weight convinces you to delay. Musashi's teaching was simple: don't carry tomorrow's weight today. Act only in the present, and the burden becomes light. This is why he trained with full intensity in every strike, as if that single stroke contained his whole life. He did not divide his attention between today and tomorrow. He poured everything into the action before him, trusting that the future would take care of itself if the present was mastered. That is the essence of discipline without delay. In your own life, procrastination often comes from magnifying a task into something monstrous. You imagine the entire mountain instead of a single step. Musashi's way is to cut the mountain into one stroke. One line, one action now, nothing more. By mastering the present, the mountain eventually falls, but without overwhelming your spirit. Presence is also protection. When you act in the present, distractions lose their grip. You cannot be pulled away by what is not here, because your attention is fully anchored in what is. That is why Musashi could face multiple opponents, shifting with perfect clarity. His mind was not scattered in 10 places. It was here, in the exact moment of the blade. To live with the discipline of presence is to free yourself from the tyranny of later, because later is only an excuse created by fear. The present is the only battlefield that exists, and the only place where victory can be won. Musashi's rule was absolute. Live here, act here, and hesitation dies here. Musashi knew that even the strongest warrior stumbles. Failure was not a stranger to him, but he never allowed it to become a chain. He believed that discipline is not proven in moments of perfection, but in how quickly you return after breaking. Procrastination grows strongest in the space after mistake, when shame convinces you delay starting again. Most people quit not because they lack ability, but because they fall once and never rise. They think a single missed day ruins everything, that a broken streak means the end. Musashi's way was different. He taught that the way is never broken, only paused. The warrior does not restart from nothing. He simply returns to the path. This rule destroys procrastination's most dangerous trick, the spiral of guilt. You tell yourself, I failed yesterday, so I must wait for the perfect day to start again. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months. But Musashi cut through this illusion with brutal clarity. Return today, return now, without drama. The faster the return, the weaker procrastination becomes. Failure itself is not the enemy. Attachment to failure is. The samurai way was to acknowledge the stumble, adjust, and continue with no hesitation. That is why Musashi's discipline lasted decades. He never wasted energy on self-pity. He simply picked up the sword again. Every return made him stronger because it trained resilience. In your own life, this means refusing to wait for Monday, for a new month, for a clean slate. The return must happen in the present moment. If you fell this morning, return this afternoon. If you failed yesterday, return today. Each quick return erases the power of delay. The warrior's strength is not in never failing, but in never staying fallen. Musashi's way teaches that failure is not the end of discipline, but part of it. Every return is a strike against procrastination, until hesitation has no place to root itself in your life. For Musashi, the goal was never simply to avoid procrastination. His aim was higher, to live in such a way that procrastination could not exist at all. He believed that when discipline becomes identity and presence becomes constant, hesitation disappears naturally. You don't fight procrastination anymore. You transcend it. Most people live as if procrastination were an enemy they must battle every day. They tried tricks, hacks, and systems, but the struggle always returns. Musashi's way was different. By living in alignment with decisive action, immediate movement, and unbroken practice, he removed the soil in which procrastination grows. The enemy starves because there is nothing left to feed it. This is the essence of the way. It is not a strategy to use for a week or a month. It is a lifelong path, a transformation of character. When you stop seeing tasks as optional and begin to see action as the natural expression of who you are, procrastination no longer makes sense. It becomes a relic of a weaker self. Musashi's teaching was not about productivity. It was about freedom. Freedom from hesitation. Freedom from wasted time. Freedom from the regret of unfinished things. He believed that only when a mind is free from delay can it act with full strength, whether in battle or in daily life. The way beyond procrastination is not perfection. It is constancy, acting now, returning after failure, cutting small delays, and living fully in the present. Over time, this created a mind so sharp, so unshakable, that hesitation cannot touch it. That is a true inheritance Musashi left. When you reach this state, procrastination no longer feels like an enemy to defeat. It feels like a stranger you once knew, but who no longer belongs in your world. You don't force yourself to act. You simply act, because that is who you have become. If you have walked with me until this point, you already know. Procrastination is not destroyed by more motivation, more pressure, or more guilt. It is destroyed by decisive action in the present moment. Musashi's way teaches that hesitation is the root of weakness, and by cutting hesitation, you cut procrastination itself. But here is the bonus, the gift for staying until the end. Musashi wrote, "Do nothing that is of no use." At first, this sounds simple, but look deeper. Every delay, every excuse, every hesitation, they are of no use. They add nothing. They create nothing. They only steal your life. To live by this rule is to cut procrastination, not just in tasks, but in thought, in speech, in all you do. Imagine living one single day by this teaching. No action wasted, no word meaningless, no moment delayed. That day would carry more weight than months of half-lived effort. And if you repeat it day after day, you'll find yourself transformed into someone who no longer fights procrastination, but has outgrown it completely. This is the samurai way. Not a trick, not a system, but life lived decisively, immediately, without hesitation. You now hold Musashi's rule in your hands. The only question left is whether you will wait or whether you will act now.